Okay, this is Unit B1 from June 2014. It's the exam that you sat as your mock test at the end of spring term. I've put all the B1 unit answers together, so this YouTube does go on for quite a while, but at least you can actually go through your papers and see where you've lost marks. Okay, question number 1. Cows eat grass. Look at the diagram, and there's a nice diagram there of a cow with some numbers on it. It shows how the cow uses the energy it gets from the grass that it eats. Okay, so into the cow's mouth we have X kilojoules of grass. Okay, that's the energy contained within the grass. We use some of that energy in respiration. We use some of that energy for growth, or the cow uses some of that energy for growth, and then some of it is wasted in urine and feces. Okay, X is the total amount of energy in the grass that the cow eats. The cow uses 150 kilojoules of energy for growth and has an efficiency of energy transfer of 4%. A lot of numbers they're giving us here. Calculate the value of X. Okay, now 4% of the energy is used for growth. That means that 4% of X is used for growth, because we know that X is the amount of energy going in. So 4% of X is 150 kilojoules, because that's how much energy is used for growth. Okay, so first of all, 4%, what is 4% as a number? It's 4 divided by 100, so that's 0.04. And then 0.04 times X, so 4% of X is 150. We can just quickly rearrange that now. X equals 150 divided by 0.04, which gives us a value of X is 3,750 kilojoules. So all that remains is for me to put that number into the space provided. Now that is worth 2 marks. Quite straightforward calculation, but you aren't given any help with equations for that on the front of the paper. You need to be quite confident and familiar with these sorts of energy transfer calculations. Okay, right, part B. The energy in the feces can be used by other organisms. Describe how. Now, watch it. We're talking about the energy in the feces. Okay, so it can be eaten by dung beetles, insects or flies, or it can be broken down by decomposers. Now be careful, they do not allow you to say that it can be eaten by animals or just eaten. That isn't enough. They want to know that it's eaten by dung beetles, insects or flies. They don't want you to talk about it being used as manure, because it's about how the energy in the feces gets used rather than being about nutrients. And remember, plants get their energy from photosynthesis, so not from the manure. Okay, and ignore eaten by decomposers, because decomposers don't eat. Okay, they will allow decayed or broken down by bacteria. There's a number of different things they'll allow there if you want to have a look at that. But ignore that the bacteria use it as a food source. If you just say that it's decomposed, that isn't enough. If you say used by decomposers, that isn't enough. So this is one of those questions you're going to have to be really, really careful to make sure that you use the right language. And our most common error, well, the most common error I saw you do was say that it was used to help plants grow. Okay, that seemed to be quite a common error amongst a lot of people in year 10. Okay, question number 2. This is a very wordy one. Jenny investigates lichen growing on trees. Oh, sorry, Jerry, not Jenny. He compares the amount of lichen on different trees growing near a factory. The factory releases sulfur dioxide into the air. He places a square grid on the south side of a tree trunk. Jerry then records the percentage of the grid covered in lichen. Okay, so there's his little grid with the lichen patches underneath. Okay, and he's putting it on the tree trunk. Okay, Jerry records the lichen growth on the trees at different distances from the factory. So he's going along all the trees outside the factory, measuring how far they are away and measuring how much lichen he's got on them. And the table shows his results. So here we go. We've got distance from the factory, goes all the way from 200 all the way down to 2,000 meters. Then we've got a percentage cover of lichen going from just 13 when it's close to the factory all the way down to 64% when it is about 2,000 meters from the factory. Okay, let's see what they're going to ask us then. Describe and explain the pattern in Jerry's results. You should find this quite straightforward. It's worth 2 marks though, so don't give them a reply like it increases or something like that. They want more details. So as the distance from the factory increases, the percentage cover of lichen increases. And remember, our exam tip here was to use the exact phrases that are either in the table headings or if it's a graph on the graph axes. Okay, part B. Jerry takes another reading. Look at his grid. It shows the amount of lichen cover on a tree. Okay, so they've given us a grid here. Suggest how far the tree is from the factory. So let's take a look. That grid is divided into 10 by 10, so 100 small squares. So if we count how many squares have got the lichen underneath them, if you look at just that patch there, there are about 12 squares, and of course we have 3 patches of lichen there, so I reckon that's about 36%. We can then look at our table over here for percentage cover being approximately 36%, and you'll see that means that the tree is probably going to be about 600 meters from the factory. So let's put that in. On the mark scheme, quite interesting, there's quite a big tolerance there. They'll allow you anything from 500 all the way up to 800. Okay, so now we have to explain how we worked out our answer. When you get a question like this, just state what you did. You counted the number of squares covered on the grid and you converted it to a percentage, and then you linked it onto the data in the table. Okay. Right, Jerry makes this statement about his results. My results allow me to predict the actual level of sulfur dioxide 100 meters away from the factory. Jerry's statement is not correct. Suggest why. Okay, well this is the first mention we've really had of sulfur dioxide levels. He's not measured them. He's said that the factory releases sulfur dioxide, but he's not actually measured any levels anywhere. Okay, so there are a couple of other things they'll accept for this one. We've got the idea that sulfur dioxide can be dispersed by the wind. That's allowed. You would need to use a meter to measure the actual sulfur dioxide level. You could get away with that, but if you just say that it's an estimate, that's not enough. Okay, that's not going to give you the mark. Other things you could have are there's no results for 100 meters because obviously it only goes down to 200 meter distance from the factory. Other acidic gases could be emitted and have an effect. The idea that it's not a fair comparison because other factories could be nearby. It could be moisture and temperature dependent. So there's lots of things you could have actually had there, but the main one, I think that's fairly obvious. He's not been measuring sulfur dioxide levels, so you can't get an absolute value for that. Okay, part D. In autumn, the leaves from the tree fall to the ground. Explain how proteins in the leaves are changed into nitrates. Now, this is another really specific language one. Decomposers break down the leaves to form ammonia. That's for 1 mark. And then nitrifying bacteria convert ammonia to nitrates. That's your 2nd mark. You're just going to have to learn them, I'm afraid. Okay, let's have a look at question number 3. Look at the picture of deer-like animals called caribou. Now, they're always going to show you an image of an animal that you haven't seen before. There's no way you can learn about every species, so you're going to have to get used to seeing a picture of something you're unfamiliar with and then applying your knowledge. Okay, so here's our animals. Here's our caribou. Caribou live in cold climates where there is a lot of snow. Suggest and explain one way their bodies are adapted to reduce heat loss. So they're very furry, so I'm going to put thick fur coats to trap the warm air close to the body, but you could have had small ears to reduce the surface area so less blood flow reaches the surface. Either of those two would have been fine. The next question, caribou feed on lichen that grows under the snow. Lichen are small plant-like organisms. They have a biochemical adaptation that helps them grow in cold climates. Soon as you see that, you must recognise this as the antifreeze question, which seems to crop up every year, some obscure plant that they've come up with that's got antifreeze in it. Okay, write about these biological adaptations to the very cold climates. Okay, now this is worth 3 marks, quite a lot of marks there. Let's see what we can put. Now, they contain antifreeze, so the cells do not freeze and get damaged. Normally this question is only a 1 marker, so that's normally the answer that we give. But they want a bit more detail here about the adaptations that this plant will have, or this organism will have. We've got enzymes in the organism are adapted to work at colder temperatures, okay? Our enzymes in our body are adapted to work best optimum temperature of 37. Obviously, if you are an organism living in that climate, you're probably going to have your enzymes adapted to work at colder temperatures. And then also the light levels are probably going to be quite low, so you could also say photosynthesis can happen in lower light levels. Okay, now this is the 6 marker. Not a very popular one, this. Not many people scored very well. Don't know whether it was because of all the information that was there, but it was one that you tended to find quite difficult. Okay, look at the picture of the Bali myna bird. There are less than 20 Bali myna birds living in the wild. They only exist in a small area of woodland on the island of Bali. Local people have trapped them to sell for pets. Each bird is worth more than a year's wages. That's really important. That's not a good sign for the myna birds. They're obviously going to get caught and sold. The local government has set up a conservation programme to save Bali myna birds. They are paying local people to breed birds. The local people can then legally sell some of those birds, and then they release the rest into the wild. Right, here's our question then. Explain reasons why the Bali myna birds should be saved from extinction. Apply your scientific knowledge to evaluate this conservation programme. So there's our question. The rest is all just setting the scene and information that we need to use. First of all, let's have a look. Reasons to prevent extinction. Now, these are the ones given on the mark scheme. Because local people could benefit from selling them, ideas of preserving cultural tradition, benefits of tourism, protecting food chains, idea of maintaining biodiversity, the idea that they could contribute to development of medicines in the future, but we have to ignore the comments of human food supply or medical purposes unless they're actually qualified. So if you talk about food chains, you're okay, future development of medicines, you're okay, but those 2 comments on their own are not okay. Okay, points for the evaluation part of this question. Now, there's a lot here. They're unlikely to survive as there's only a few left. They could still be hunted when they're released. Miners released into their natural habitat, which is a good thing. Already they're at a critical level, only a small habitat, so there might not be enough food for them in that small area of woodland. The fact that people get money means they're more likely to help. There's a few more detailed ones here that expect to see in a higher level answer. The population is not viable, so it's unlikely to survive. Small numbers mean little genetic variation, and there's loads of others there that you can read through. I'll let you do that in your own time. But let's just have a look. Let's try and write something down. Okay. So, the population of myna birds living in the wild has reached such small numbers that they are likely to become extinct if no conservation programme is introduced. The myna bird may well be part of several food chains, and losing it could disrupt the balance within the habitat. There are benefits for local people, including tourism and an income from selling the birds as pets, as well as them being part of their culture. The conservation programme has several positive aspects, including allowing local people to benefit financially, encouraging them to protect the wild population of birds. Unfortunately, the programme may have come too late. There is only a small number of birds remaining, so there is little genetic variation within the species, and that could leave them vulnerable to some diseases or illnesses that could wipe out the entire population. Okay, so there's a few, that's a sort of model answer really, probably a 4/5, probably heading towards the 5. Let's just have a look. Now, for 5/6 marks, you need 2 reasons to prevent extinction and a detailed evaluation using appropriate scientific terms. So let's just see what we've got in there. So 2 reasons. There's the reason of tourism, and there's another reason there of the food chains. Okay, and then the evaluation, we've got this business about encouraging people by getting them to benefit financially, and we've also got some scientific terms that are correct down there about genetic variation and the problems when your gene pool gets significantly reduced. Okay, right, this is our last question. So it looks like it's about zebras. Here we go, the photograph at the top. Look at the picture of the zebras. There are many theories why zebras have stripes. One theory is that the stripes stop flies sucking their blood. The stripes make zebras less attractive to the flies. Okay, part A. Darwin's theory of evolution explains how zebras evolved to have stripes. Read the information in the flowchart. There are 2 stages missing. Finish off the flowchart. Okay, this looks quite straightforward. Some of the zebra's ancestors had stripes, others did not. That's the first stage. And then the third stage, being bitten by the flies caused animals harm. Many of those that got bitten died from diseases carried by the flies. And then the last stage, after many generations, all the zebras had stripes. So let's have a go at filling that first box in. Okay, so the zebras without stripes got bitten more than the ones with stripes. Now that fits in quite well there, because underneath it actually tells us that those that got bitten by the flies then got diseases and they started dying out. So that gives us an advantage then for the zebras with stripes. Now our second box, whenever we talk about Darwin and evolution, we always have to talk about the adaptation being passed on to the offspring. So here's our opportunity. The zebras with stripes bred and passed on their adaptation to their offspring. There's usually a question somewhere in the paper for you to make that statement. Okay, part B. A group of scientists investigated whether stripes were a defence against flies. They used 4 models of zebra, each with different coat patterns. All the models were covered in sticky glue. The diagram shows the models. So we've got 4 different zebra models there. One of them with stripes, the other's sort of variety of different coats, dark grey, light grey, and a sort of spotty white one. The scientists' observations supported the theory that stripes were a defence against flies. Okay, suggest one observation the scientists could have made. And then the scientists publish their results. One reason for publishing results is so other scientists can see them, write down one other reason why scientists publish their results. That question crops up an awful lot, sort of dotted all over the place. So let's go back to the observation the scientists could have made. They could compare the number of flies that were stuck to the plain coats and compare them to the number stuck to the striped coats. That would have been one observation. And then if we drop down to our scientists publishing question, one of the reasons, another reason you can think of is so other scientists can check and continue the work, okay? There's a number of different options for that question. It's the same every time it's asked. They could allow work to be developed further, allow to get feedback for improvement, allow other scientists not to take the credit. We can allow peer review so that work can be evaluated, and they'll also allow scientists can use the work to back up their own theories. So you've got a potential of 5 different ways of getting that mark there. Okay, that's the end of section B1, and if you want to, you can go on and review your performance B2 that was. You can go on and review your performance in C2. Okay, thank you.